In 1938, in a handful of villages in the Belgian Congo, something strange began happening to the children. At first, it did not look like an outbreak. There was no fever, no cough, no rash, nothing to suggest one child had passed something to another, but the children kept losing the ability to walk. It didn't happen to all of them, and it didn't happen slowly. One boy ran out to the fields one morning, and a week later his legs had locked up on him, stiff, turned inward, and he moved with this strange, lurching walk that looked as if his own body had locked up on him. And here is the part that stopped the first doctors cold. These children were not starving. They ate every day. What was on their plates was the same thing that had carried their families through drought, through war, through every bad year before this one. That food was doing it. The thing keeping them alive was the thing tying their legs. So how does that happen? How does a crop that 100 million people eat without a problem cripple a child in a week, leave him that way for life, then disappear from the village as quietly as it showed up? Nobody had an answer for a long time. When it finally came, it turned out to be sitting in plain sight, in a bucket of water and a number of days nobody thought to count. The crop is cassava. If you've never seen it, picture a long brown root, something like an oversized potato that grows just about anywhere. Poor soil, barely any rain, brutal heat, doesn't matter. It holds. And that toughness is the whole reason it matters. Across Central Africa, cassava is the thing that doesn't fail when everything else does. The maize dries up, the beans die, and the cassava is still there. For tens of millions of people, that root is the difference between eating and not eating. These communities had grown it for generations, and they knew exactly what they were dealing with. There are two kinds of cassava. The sweet kind you can boil and eat. The bitter kind needed work. You peeled the roots, broke them up, soaked them in water for a few days, dried them in the sun, then pounded them into flour. That wasn't habit for the sake of habit. It was knowledge, handed down across generations, that turned a tough, bitter root into safe, edible food. The women who did the cooking had done it 10,000 times, which is exactly why nobody saw it coming. When the kids started going down, nobody looked twice at the cassava. Why would they? The cassava was the one thing that had never let them down. The early signs were easy to wave off on their own. A kid says his legs feel heavy, a bit of cramping, a stumble that just looks like clumsiness. In a village with work to do, none of that sets off an alarm. Then it would land all the way, fast. A child fine in the morning and unable to stand straight by night. And it picked a certain kind of person. Children, especially those still growing, young mothers, especially those nursing or pregnant, almost never the old men, almost never the richer family a village over. That right there, who it hit and who it skipped, was the clue that should have cracked the whole thing. In 1938, a Belgian colonial medical officer named Dr. Giovanni Trolley compiled reports from 8 doctors working across the Kongo region. He described the stiff legs, the sudden onset, the strange clustering of cases. He could describe exactly what the disease did. He could not tell you why. The answer was inside the cassava the entire time. The same bitterness that makes the tough roots shrug off pests and bad weather also carries the raw material for cyanide. Not enough to drop you on the spot, just enough taken in day after day in a body already short on the nutrients it needs to clear it, to go after the nerves that run the legs, and to do it for good. That long soak the women knew so well was never just tradition, it was the step that pulled the danger out. Skip it and ordinary food turns into a slow poison you can't see or taste. So the real question was never what the poison is, it was this. Why would people who knew exactly how to make their food safe suddenly stop doing it? Nobody decided to cut the step. Survival decided it for them. It starts with drought. When the rains don't come, hunger shows up first, and a hungry family can't afford to wait days for a root to soak. So they rush it, they process it less, and more of the poison stays in the food. Then poverty stacks on top. The long soak pulls the danger out, but it also pulls out nutrients. So the same malnutrition that pushes people toward bitter cassava is also stripping their bodies of the protein they'd need to handle whatever cyanide gets through. The diet delivers the poison and disarms the only defense against it at the same time. War finishes the job. When fighting scatters people or wrecks the local economy, families fall back on the one crop that always grows, the bitter cassava, and they lean on it hardest exactly when they've got the least time, the least food, and the least ability to prepare it right. The disease doesn't show up in the good years. It shows up in the worst ones, in the poorest places, among the people who had no other option on the table. That's the chain. Drought shortens the soak, poverty kills the defense, war takes away the choice. 3 forces, none of them in any one villager's control, stacking up into a child who can't walk. It would be easy to let this stay a bunch of numbers. Don't. Every case here is a specific person whose whole life bent in the space of about a week. The paralysis doesn't heal. There is no treatment that walks it back. A kid who gets Konzo at 7 carries that stiff, scissoring walk into adulthood, into every field he will struggle to work, every distance he will struggle to cross. And it struck mothers especially, because in times of food scarcity, mothers consistently eat last and least. The same mothers who fed their children first were the ones silently taking in more of the poison. The people giving the most food away were keeping the most poison for themselves. And because it strikes the poorest villages in the worst years, far from any city or camera, the real numbers were never fully counted. Konzo got written up in 1938, and then the world mostly looked away. So who do you blame? This is where Konzo won't give you the villain you want. There is no company that poisoned a well, no official who waved through a cracked dam. The cause is drought, poverty, and war, and none of those has a face you can put in a courtroom. A disaster with a culprit gets investigated. A disaster that's just what happens when desperate people are forced to eat in a desperate way gets filed under poverty and forgotten about. What finally helped was almost stupidly simple. Once researchers nailed down the link between Konzo and improperly processed cassava, the fix didn't need medicine at all, just a different way to handle the flour. Spreading it out and letting the poison escape into the air before cooking, something you can teach a village in an afternoon. There's one last thing worth knowing. The word Konzo isn't a medical term. It comes from the Yaka people, and it means tied legs. They took it from the name of a hunting curse, the kind meant to weaken an animal's legs so it couldn't run and could be caught. When this thing came for their children, that was the word they already had for it. They'd named it long before any doctor wrote it down. The knowledge to stop it costs nothing. It's the conditions that take away people's time and food to use it that cost everything. Remember that bucket of water? The one the women soaked those roots in for days before anyone got sick. That water was never a ritual. It was the whole defense, the one thing standing between a crop that feeds you and a paralysis that never lets go. And the only thing that ever took that defense away was a family getting too hungry, too rushed, and too poor to wait. The danger was never that the food looked poisoned. The danger was that it looked exactly like survival. Because for those families, that is what it was.